Hey, everyone. My name's Mike, and I'm about to share something that turned my life upside down. I thought my marriage to Laura was rock solid. 5 years together, a house in Chicago, plans for a big vacation next summer. But one evening, I found a cafe receipt in her jacket pocket from time. She swore she was at a charity meeting. That little piece of paper cracked everything open. This is the story of how I uncovered her secret and took back my peace without breaking the law. I'm 32, a marketing manager at a mid-sized firm downtown. Laura's 30, works part-time at a local nonprofit, and volunteers with their charity fund. We met in college, hit it off over late-night study sessions, and got married a few years later. We weren't perfect, but we were good. Or so I thought. We'd grill in the backyard with friends, plan trips, talk about maybe starting a family someday. Our neighbor Nate, a 35-year-old fitness trainer, was part of that circle. He'd come over for beers, crack jokes, and talk about his gym clients. I liked the guy, trusted him. That's what made this so hard to swallow. It was a Tuesday night, nothing special. I got home around 6 after a long day at the office. Laura had borrowed my car that morning to run errands, and her jacket was still slung over the passenger seat. I grabbed it to toss in the laundry, and as I shook it out, a crumpled receipt fell to the floor. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick it up. It was from Brewed Awakening, a cafe downtown, time-stamped last Thursday at 3:17 p.m. Laura had told me she was at a charity board meeting that afternoon. I stood there, staring at the receipt, my stomach twisting. Why would she lie about something so small? I didn't confront her right away. That's not me. I'm the guy who thinks things through, weighs the options. But the receipt stuck with me. I remembered Nate mentioning Brewed Awakening a few weeks back, saying they made a killer latte. It could have been a coincidence, but it didn't sit right. Laura got home an hour later, all smiles, talking about her day at the nonprofit. I played along, asked casual questions about her schedule. How was last week's board meeting? I said, keeping my tone light. She didn't skip a beat. Oh, boring as usual. Just budgets and planning. She changed the subject fast, and that's when I knew I had to dig deeper. The next few days, I started noticing things I'd brushed off before. Laura was staying late at the nonprofit more often, saying it was for fundraising prep. Her phone was always on silent, and she'd step out to take calls. I'd see Nate jogging by her house at odd hours, waving like it was no big deal. Once I caught them chatting in our driveway when I pulled up from work. Nothing overt, just a little too comfortable. Micah was screaming, but I needed proof, not just a hunch. I started small. I checked Laura's social media, something I never did before. Her posts were normal, pictures of charity events, coffee runs, gym selfies. But Nate's comments were everywhere. Looking good, on a photo from fundraiser. Missed you at the cafe, on another. That one hit like a punch. I cross-checked dates. The charity events she claimed to attend didn't always match her post timestamps. I wasn't ready to accuse her of anything, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. Then came a kicker. Laura brought home a stack of papers from the charity fund, budget sheets, donation logs. She left them on the kitchen counter, saying she'd review them later. I'm no accountant, but I know numbers. Late that night, I flipped through the logs. Some donations didn't add up. Small amounts, $50 here, $100 there, marked as miscellaneous expenses. It looked sloppy, not like Laura, who was always organized. I wondered if Nate was involved. He'd been at every fundraiser I could remember, always hovering near Laura. I wasn't about to blow up my marriage over a hunch, so I decided to be smart. I called a lawyer friend, Sarah, who'd helped with our house closing. Over coffee, I laid it out. The receipt, Laura's lies, the weird vibe with Nate, the sketchy charity logs. Sarah didn't sugarcoat it. If you're suspecting an affair and financial misconduct, you need hard evidence, and it has to be legal. No hacking phones, no following them around. Use what's in your rights. She suggested checking the charity's public records since I'd donated to them before. That gave me access as a donor. That night, I lay awake, Laura asleep next to me. I didn't feel anger, not yet, just this heavy weight like I was losing something I couldn't name. I wasn't just looking for proof of an affair anymore. If Laura and Nate were skimming money from charity, that was bigger than us. It was wrong, and if it was true, I wasn't going to let it slide. I didn't know what I'd find, but I was ready to face it. This wasn't about revenge. It was about the truth. You ever feel like you're holding a puzzle piece that doesn't fit, but you can't stop turning it over in your hands? That's where I was, staring at that cafe receipt from Laura's jacket, knowing it wasn't just about coffee. I'm Mike, and this is part 2 of how I uncovered my wife's secret with our neighbor Nate and fought for justice without losing myself. What I found next wasn't just about their affair. It was about something bigger, something that could hurt a lot of people. After spotting those discrepancies in Laura's charity fund reports, I knew I couldn't just sit on it. The receipt had been the first crack, but now I was seeing fractures everywhere. Laura was still acting normal, chatting about work, making dinner plans, but her phone was always close, always silent. Nate kept showing up too, jogging by, stopping to say hi when I was pulling into the driveway. Each time, I nodded, kept it cool, but my mind was racing. Were they playing me for a fool? And what was going on with the charity's money? I started with what my lawyer friend Sarah suggested: stick to legal moves. As a donor to the charity, I had the right to request their public financial records. The next morning, I emailed the fund treasurer, a guy named Tom who I'd met at a fundraiser. I kept it vague, said I was reviewing my contributions and wanted to see the latest reports. Tom replied within hours, attaching a spreadsheet of donations and expenses. I spent that night at my laptop, cross-referencing it with the papers Laura left on our counter. The numbers didn't lie. Over the past 6 months, nearly $3,000 was listed as event supplies or consulting fees, but there were no receipts, no details. One entry caught my eye: a $500 payment to N. Carter Consulting. Nate's last name was Carter. My pulse kicked up. Was Nate getting paid by the charity for nothing? I needed more than a hunch. I remember Laura mentioning that Nate helped with logistics at fundraisers, but logistics didn't cost $500 a pop. I dug into the charity's website, checking event photos. Sure enough, Nate was in half of them, always near Laura, setting up tables or handing out flyers. It looked innocent on the surface, but paired with the cafe receipt and those payments, it felt like a cover. I decided to test the waters. At dinner, I casually brought up the charity. "Hey, Laura, how's the fund doing? I saw some big expenses in the reports. What's Nate's role again?" Her forward paused midair, just for a second. "Oh, he just helps with setup," she said, eyes on her plate. "Nothing major." She switched topics fast, asking about my work. That dodge told me more than her words. I didn't push. Instead, I contacted Tom again, asking if I could see invoices for those consulting fees. He hesitated, said he'd need board approval, which raised another red flag. Why the secrecy? The next step was trickier. I had a home security camera in our garage, installed last year after a break-in down the street. It was my property, so checking the footage was legal. Late that night, I scrolled through the past month's recordings. My heart sank when I saw it. Nate's car pulling into our driveway 3 times when I was at work. Each time, he stayed for an hour, maybe 2. Laura's car was there too. I saved the clips, feeling sick but focused. This wasn't just about them sneaking around. If they were skimming charity funds, that was theft. Real consequences, not just hurt feelings. I needed to know how deep this went. Sarah connected me with a private investigator, Elena, who specialized in financial fraud. Over a call, I shared the footage, the charity reports, and the Ann Carter payments. Elena was blunt. "Sounds like a classic setup. Small withdrawals, fake invoices, someone on the inside. If Laura's signing off on these, she's complicit. But we need hard proof of the money trail." She agreed to trace the payments legally, using public records and her contacts at the bank where the charity had its account. It'd take a few days, so I had to wait. Those days were brutal. Laura and I were like roommates, not a couple. I catch her texting late at night, smiling at her phone, then locking it when I walked by. Once Nate dropped by to borrow a ladder, and I watched them exchange a quick look, nothing obvious, but enough to make my skin crawl. I kept my routine normal, went to work, hit the gym, but every spare moment was spent planning. I wasn't angry anymore, just determined. If they were betraying me and stealing from charity that helped local kids, they'd answer for it. Elena called back on Friday. She found a bank account linked to Nate, opened 3 months ago, with deposits matching the charity's consulting payments. Some of the money was transferred to another account in Laura's name. Not our joint one, a new one I didn't know about. My chest tightened. This wasn't a fling. They were working together, covering their tracks. Elena warned me to stay calm. "We've got enough for the police, but let's go to the charity board first. It's cleaner, less personal." I agreed. I didn't want a public fight, just justice. I set up a meeting with Tom and the board for the following week. I present the evidence, the footage, the financial records, the bank trail. Every night, I rehearsed what I'd say, keeping it factual, no emotions. But deep down, I was bracing for the fallout. Laura was my wife. Nate was my friend. Uncovering their lies meant dismantling the life I'd built. Still, I couldn't let it go. Not just for me, but for the people who trusted that charity. The truth was coming, and it was going to hit hard. Truth has a way of catching up, no matter how well you hide it. I'm Mike, and this is part 3 of how I uncovered my wife Laura's affair with our neighbor Nate and their scheme to siphon money from a charity. I had proof, bank records, security footage, fake invoices, and a meeting with the charity board set to expose them. But standing on the edge of blowing up my marriage and their lies, I felt the weight of what was coming. This is how it all went down, clean and by the book. The week before the board meeting felt like walking a tightrope. Laura was still playing the part of the perfect wife, planning a weekend barbecue, texting me about groceries. Nate even showed up once, dropping off a toolbox he'd borrowed, acting like nothing was wrong. I kept my cool, nodding through their small talk, but every interaction was a reminder of their betrayal. At night, I'd lie awake, running through the evidence. $3,000 in questionable charity payments, Nate's car in our driveway when I wasn't home, bank transfers to accounts I didn't know Laura had. My lawyer friend Sarah and the PI, Elena, had prepped me well. Stick to facts, Sarah said. No emotions, no accusations you can't prove. I was ready, but it didn't make it easier. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at the charity's office downtown. I told Laura I had a late work call, so she didn't suspect anything. The board consisted of 5 members, including Tom, the treasurer I'd been emailing. I arrived early, laptop in hand, and handed Tom a USB drive with the evidence, spreadsheets, bank statements, security clips, and Elena's report on the money trail. He looked uneasy, flipping through the printed summary I'd included. "This is serious, Mike," he said. I nodded. "I know. That's why I'm here." When the board convened, I was given 10 minutes to present. I stood at the front of the room, projecting my laptop onto a screen. My voice stayed steady as I walked them through it. First, the charity's financials, $3,000 in consulting fees and event supplies with no receipts. Then, the bank records showing payments to Carter Consulting and transfers to an account in Laura's name. I showed 2 clips from my garage camera, Nate's car arriving at our house during work hours, dates matching the charity's meetings. Finally, I shared Elena's findings. The account Nate opened 3 months ago, funded by charity money. "I'm a donor," I said. "I trusted this fund to help kids in our community. This isn't personal. It's about accountability." The room went quiet. Tom stared at the screen, jaw tight. A board member, Claire, asked, "Have you contacted the police?" I said I hadn't. Yet, but what if needed? Another member, Greg, suggested calling Laura and Nate to respond. I agreed, knowing they'd been invited to the meeting as volunteers. Laura arrived first, unaware I was there. When she saw me at the front, her smile froze. Nate walked a minute later, pausing in the doorway. The air shifted, heavy with what was about to unfold. Tom didn't waste time. He replayed my presentation for them, slide by slide. Laura's hands gripped her chair as the bank transfers appeared. Nate shifted in his seat during the security footage. When Tom asked for explanations, Laura stammered, "There must be a mistake. I handle budgets, but I don't track every payment." Nate jumped in, claiming his consulting was for event planning, but he couldn't name a single task. Their answers unraveled fast. Claire cut them off. "This looks intentional. We're suspending you both from all fund activities, effective now." Greg added, "We'll need to audit everything, and we're notifying the authorities." Laura's eyes darted to me, a mix of panic and anger. "Mike, why didn't you talk to me first?" she said, voice low. I kept my tone even. I did ask about the fund. You said it was fine. Nate stayed silent, staring at the floor. The board dismissed them, and they left without another word. I stayed to answer questions, promising to share any additional evidence. Tom thanked me, but his face was grim. "I trusted Laura," he said. I nodded. So did I. Driving home, I felt hollow. I'd done what I set out to do, exposed their lies, protected the charity, but it didn't feel like a win. Laura wasn't there when I got back. She'd texted, saying she was staying with a friend. I didn't reply. That night, Sarah called to check in. You did the right thing, she said. The police will take it from here. Elena had already sent her report to the authorities, and the charity was hiring an auditor. The wheels were turning, but I knew the hardest part was still ahead. Facing Laura, ending our marriage, and rebuilding my life. The next morning, I got a call from Tom. The board had found more discrepancies, another $1,500 unaccounted for, linked to the same accounts. They were pressing charges. I felt a strange relief, not because I wanted Laura or Nate destroyed, but because the truth was out. They couldn't hide anymore. Still, I couldn't shake the question. How had I missed this for so long? The lies, the money, the affair. It was all right in front of me. That's what hurt most. But I wasn't done yet. I had to close this chapter for good. Betrayal cuts deep, but what comes after can redefine you. I'm Mike, and this is part 4 of how I faced my wife Laura's affair with our neighbor Nate and their theft from charity. After exposing them to the charity board, I watched their lies unravel. But the truth didn't fix my broken marriage or the ache in my chest. This is how I picked up the pieces, ended things cleanly, and started rebuilding my life, all while staying on the right side of the law. The days after the board meeting were a blur. Laura didn't come home that night. She texted she was staying with a friend. No explanation. I didn't push. The silence in our house was louder than any argument. I packed a bag and moved into a short-term rental downtown, a small apartment I found online. It wasn't about running away. I needed space to think, to plan what came next. My lawyer, Sarah, was already preparing divorce papers. You've got solid evidence of infidelity, she said. It'll help with the settlement. I nodded, but it wasn't about money. I just wanted out. Laura called 2 days later, her voice shaky. Mike, can we talk? I didn't mean for this to happen. I agreed to meet at a neutral spot, a coffee shop near my office. She was there when I arrived, stirring her coffee, eyes fixed on the table. No apologies, no tears, just a quiet plea. I messed up, okay? But the charity thing wasn't my idea. Nate pushed me into it. I cut her off. You made choices, Laura. Both of you. She didn't argue. I told her I filed for divorce and that the police were investigating the charity funds. Her hands trembled as she nodded. I'll cooperate, she said. That was it. We didn't owe each other anything more. The charity board moved fast. Tom, the treasurer, emailed me an update. The audit confirmed $4,500 in misappropriated funds tied to Nate's and Laura's accounts. They've been siphoning small amounts for months, hidden as vendor payments. The board pressed charges, and the police took over. I got a call from a detective, Officer Ruiz, who asked for my security footage and bank records. I handed everything over, grateful I'd kept it legal. You did us a favor, Ruiz said. This could have gone unnoticed for years. Knowing the charity, meant for kids' after-school programs, was safe felt like the one win in this mess. Nate's life started crumbling fast. Word spread in our neighborhood, and his gym clients dropped him one by one. I heard from a mutual friend that he'd lost his lease at the training studio. Too many cancellations. I didn't feel sorry for him. He'd been at our house, laughing at my table, while planning those withdrawals with Laura. Still, I didn't want revenge, just consequences. Laura faced her own fallout. The nonprofit fired her, and her name was all over local forums. People who trusted her for years stopped calling. She was persona non grata in the community she'd worked so hard to impress. I wasn't celebrating. Every night in that bare apartment, I'd replay the last 5 years. How had I missed the signs? The late nights, the locked phone, the way Laura and Nate always seemed to sync up at events. I started seeing a therapist, a guy named Dr. Patel, recommended by a coworker. He didn't sugarcoat it. You're grieving, he said. Not just the marriage, but the trust. He pushed me to focus on what I could control, my job, my friends, my future. I leaned on my buddy Jake, who'd been through a divorce himself. Over beers, he'd listen. No judgment, just letting me vent. It helped more than I expected. The divorce process was quick. Sarah used the affair evidence, texts, footage, Laura's own admission, to secure a fair split. I kept our savings. Laura got the house, which she planned to sell. I didn't care about the stuff. I just want a clean break. By the time the papers were signed, Laura had moved to her sister's place, smartest, to a different state. She called once more, asking to keep things civil. I agreed, but set a firm boundary. No contact unless necessary. It felt final, like closing a book. One evening, Jake dragged me to a bar to get out of my head. Over a game of pool, he asked how I was holding up. I told him the truth. I was angry, but not at Laura or Nate anymore, at myself for being blind. Jake shook his head. They hit well, man. You're not a detective. He was right, but it still stung. That night, I decided to share my story online, not for pity, but to process it. I posted a short video on YouTube, laying out the basics, the receipt, the charity fraud, the divorce. I didn't expect much, but comments started pouring in. People sharing their own stories of betrayal, thanking me for staying level-headed. The police case was moving forward. Laura agreed to repay the stolen funds to avoid jail time. Nate wasn't so lucky. He faced fraud charges. I didn't follow his case closely, didn't need to. My focus was on moving forward. I started running again, something I hadn't done since college. It cleared my head, gave me a rhythm. I wasn't healed, but I was getting there one step at a time. Closure isn't a moment. It's a choice you make every day. I'm Mike, and this is the final part of how I uncovered my wife Laura's affair with our neighbor Nate and their theft from a charity. Exposing them to the board and walking away from my marriage left me raw but free. Now, months later, I'm sharing how I closed that chapter, found peace, and turned my story into something that might help someone else. This is about justice, not revenge, and moving forward on my own terms. The weeks after the divorce were quiet, almost too quiet. My new apartment in Chicago felt like a blank slate, empty but full of possibility. The charity case was wrapping up, and the legal fallout for Laura and Nate was taking shape. Officer Ruiz, the detective handling the investigation, called with an update. Laura had agreed to a plea deal, repay the full $4,500 she and Nate had siphoned from the charity to avoid jail time. She'd already started making payments, dipping into her savings from the house sale. Nate wasn't so lucky. He faced fraud charges, and with his gym business tanking, he couldn't afford a good lawyer. Last I heard, he'd taken a deal too, but it included community service and a fine. He moved out of state shortly after, chased out by the gossip in our neighborhood. I didn't keep tabs on them. That wasn't the point. The charity board sent me a letter, thanking me for stepping forward. They'd revamped their oversight, hired a new treasurer, and were back to funding kids' programs. Knowing those donations were safe again felt better than any personal win. Still, I had my own battles. The betrayal lingered. Not just Laura and Nate's lies, but the fact I trusted them so completely. My therapist, Dr. Patel, helped me unpack that. You're not naive for believing in people, he said during one session. You're rebuilding trust in yourself now. He was right. I started small, running every morning, grabbing coffee with friends, focusing on work projects that excited me. My YouTube video, the one I posted after the divorce, kept gaining traction. It wasn't viral, but it hit a nerve. Comments poured in from people who'd been through similar betrayals, spouses, friends, even coworkers who'd stolen from them. Your story gave me the push to speak up, one person wrote. Another said, thanks for showing you can walk away without burning everything down. I started replying, sharing what I'd learned about staying calm, working with lawyers, and prioritizing evidence over anger. It wasn't about being a hero. It was about showing you could face the worst and come out stronger. One Saturday, about 3 months after the board meeting, I ran into Tom, the charity treasurer, at a grocery store. He was grabbing cereal, looking less stressed than the last time I'd seen him. Mike, you saved us, he said, shaking my hand. The fund's stronger now because of you. I shrugged it off, but his words stuck. He mentioned Laura had reached out to him, apologizing for the mess. She was working a desk job somewhere in Ohio, trying to start over. I didn't ask for details. That chapter was closed, and I didn't need to reopen it. Work became my anchor. I pitched a new marketing campaign at the firm, something I'd been too distracted to tackle before. My boss loved it, and it landed me a small promotion. Not life-changing, but enough to feel like I was moving forward. Jake, my buddy, kept me grounded too. We'd meet up for basketball or beers, and he'd check in without making it heavy. You're not the guy who got played anymore, he said one night. You're the guy who took control. It was simple, but it hit home. I wasn't defined by Laura's choices or Nate's betrayal. The hardest part was forgiving myself. I'd spent months replaying every moment, every missed clue, every time I'd ignore my gut. Dr. Patel pushed me to let that go. You acted when it mattered, he said. That's what counts. I started to believe him. I I wasn't perfect, but I'd done the right thing, protected the charity, ended the marriage cleanly, and stayed true to my values. No shouting matches, no public drama, just facts and consequences. One evening, scrolling through YouTube comments, I saw a message that stopped me cold. It was from a woman who'd watched my video and reported her own partner's fraud to their company. "Your story showed me I could stand up without losing myself," she wrote. That's when it clicked. Sharing this wasn't just for me. It was for anyone stuck in that moment of doubt, wondering if they could face the truth and come out okay. I recorded a follow-up video, laying out the steps I took, talking to a lawyer, gathering evidence, staying calm. I ended it with something I wished I'd known at the start. You don't have to destroy someone to hold them accountable. Protect what matters and keep going. Now, I'm not saying I'm fully healed. Some days, I still feel the sting of those years with Laura, the trust one lost. But I'm not stuck there. I'm running again, planning a trip with Jake to Colorado next spring, and even went on a couple of dates recently. Nothing serious, just testing the waters. The charity's thriving, Laura and Nate face their consequences, and I'm building a life I can be proud of. That's not a fairy tale. It's just real. Thanks for listening. If you're going through something like this, know you're not alone. Take it one step at a time, and you'll find your way.